Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is you are. Welcome to Coffee Break. I'm Spencer Campbell, aka Gila RPGs, and this is Coffee Break. Every Sunday, I sit down with one of my friends from the RPG design scene, and we just hang out. It's just a chance for me to catch up and talk to people. Not an interview show, just a cool hanging out time with my not cool fool friends, my cool friends. And this week I have Chris with me, and I am so excited about that. But before we just dive into things, Chris, do you mind if somehow somebody doesn't know who you are? Could you let the world know who you are? Could you introduce yourself?
Ah, those lucky ducks who haven't heard me shouting on Twitter. Hi, uh, I'm Chris, and I make games. I don't know. Uh,
Perfect.
you might have heard of a game called The Wretched. I made that, amongst other things. And yeah, hi. I'm so bad. I'm sorry for ruining
No,
your
you
stream.
nailed it. You nailed it. Now, yes, you are known for The Wretched, but you are known in my heart for
Oh,
this.
Go Alone. Yeah, I love how much you love Go Alone.
I think I'm your number one Go Alone fan with how much I love that game. Go Alone, for folks who don't know, it's a wretched and alone game, but it's inspired by kind of like Zelda, and you play as like a sentient chosen weapon. It was so much fun to play, Chris. I loved it. It was very
It was a
very
lot of
good.
fun to write. I really enjoyed writing it.
It's a
That was
good.
like the second Wretched and Alone game I wrote. It was cool.
I feel like yeah. I feel like yeah. When did this come out? Is there? I don't know if there's a date in here.
Like
Probably not.
last year.
Yeah. It was awesome. Anyway, uh,
Look on itch, I could tell you.
yeah, we don't need to worry about that.
We're gonna do
Um,
it anyway. 'Cause-
so I'm super excited to chat with Chris because I feel like you are one of the first people I like knew or learned about in the indie RPG scene. Like as I was first dipping my toes into things and I was learning things, Uh, obviously, the Wretched exploded last year, and I was like, ah, this Chris Bissette person seems to know what's going on. I will follow them and figure out. And over
We
the
sort of
years,
came up at the same time, didn't we?
I feel like we
Like,
did kind of
yeah,
ish.
like you were the first person on Wretched Cast when I was doing that.
That's right. That's right. And in my very short-lived Psych of RPGs video thing, I had you on
Oh
for a learning
yeah.
thing as well.
Oh,
Uh,
they were good. I liked them.
I should get back to doing that at some point.
I keep thinking I should get back to Wretched Cast.
Isn't that
I have time now.
that?
Maybe I should do that.
Oh, look at this. Somebody found out about me from your podcast. There we
Yeah.
go.
Oh, somebody listened to the podcast. Wow.
That's the real surprise
Success.
takeaway right there.
Yeah. Holy shit. Can I swear on this before we
Oh,
get
absolutely. I I always forget to ask that too when I'm on shows.
Yeah.
I'm a as you know, I'm a psychologist, and I'm a cognitive psychologist, so I study things like language, and one of my areas of expertise that I study is literally profanity. I study
Oh,
the psychology behind profanity. So it's real hard for me to not use it because I'm around it all the time.
yeah.
Anyway, so please
That's
do.
interesting.
Oh
Cool.
yeah,
Good. Noted.
that's right. I was on Kat's podcast recently, and she mentioned uh during her interview I said the word gun fucks because I was talking about Indira Slattery's game, and I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't even think about how that might not be okay to say out
No.
loud.
Fuck you, Adira, for making us all swear constantly.
So how are things? You said we chatted for just a moment before we got started. You said you've been settling in. You like
Yeah.
the new places feeling more like
It's
home.
coming together. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's getting there. We've only been in it 6, 8 weeks. So, there are still holes in walls
Yeah.
and like there's no carpet and it's getting there though.
We're
It feels like home in a way that the apartments and stuff of the last 17 years never felt like home. So that's cool.
That's super cool. We're we're moving into our first home in less than a month at the start of January, and so I assume we'll probably be going through a lot of the experiences that you and other homeowners of like, oh, we have to like, there's so much more. There's so much more
So much.
involved that,
Yeah. It's not just buy a house. Now you have a house.
right.
It's buy a house. Have you got another £10,000 to make it livable?
I'm
The answer is no.
I'm mostly just getting it so that Clover has a yard to run around in. We're buying it
Yeah,
for her. Speaking of,
it's
she's
nice having outside space.
yeah.
I haven't used it yet because it's winter, but it's nice to look at.
It's in theory it's gonna be nice.
Yeah, it's going to be great when it's not -2 degrees outside.
Speaking of Clover, for folks who are either new to my stream or haven't watched a stream in a while, we have added some Clover emotes to this thanks to Raul, who made awesome pixel art of Clover. So feel free to use those as much as you want. And Adam Bell has redeemed a Clover cam, which she's underneath my desk. So, oh, there she is.
Oh, hey.
I will do my best to try and get her. Hi, Clover. All right, she's doing good. So you're settling into a new home. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You're also settling into like full-time game designer. How's that going?
Yeah, it's going okay. I am fighting that, when you get in that mindset because you've worked in an office or retail or whatever for so long that you have to always be busy or you're not working hard enough.
Yeah.
I am fighting that urge so strongly. Like, I think I spend like 3 hours a day doing creative work. And initially that didn't feel like enough,
Mm,
but I'm getting more done than I did when I was doing it around a full-time job. And I'm
nice.
not exhausted at the end of the day. So, if my working day is 3 hours long and I don't work weekends, I'm happy with that, frankly.
Yeah, that sounds sounds pretty nice.
Yeah.
There was like
But that's
some,
like that's like ass in chair writing
yeah,
work, like there are other things like there's web store fulfillment and going to the post office is work and like,
sure.
you know, there are other things that are work, but they aren't the stuff that contributes towards an end product.
Yeah, I see what you're
That makes
saying.
sense.
Yeah, I get what
Yeah.
you're saying.
It's good though.
There
I
was like
enjoy it.
there was like some like I don't think I wouldn't say discourse, but there was like a discussion going that I saw on Twitter and I popped up in a few circles of like professional writers. So like out like
Hmm.
adjacent to what we're doing. And like Neil Gaiman was like I wrote Coraline like 50 words a night
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah, like that was super interesting to me because I think we talked about this. I come from a fiction background. Like
Right.
before I was doing games, I was doing fiction, and it's this whole thing where like the most vocal the most vocal amateurs are the ones who will tell you you have to put your ass in the seat for 4 hours a day and write 2,000 words a day, 5,000 words a day, or you're not a real writer.
Right.
And it's just bullshit. Look at Ursula Le Guin's writing schedule. I think she wrote for like half an hour a day.
Right.
And most of her day was like get up, make a coffee, go for a long walk, look at the trees.
Hmm.
And like that's where the work gets done. The work isn't putting your butt in the chair and typing. The work is up here.
Right.
And you know that as well as I know
Yeah.
that. Yeah, and like if you this is the problem with like, pay rates being per word, isn't it? Like
Mm.
what if you put down 2,000 words but they're all shit? It's pointless.
Right,
You
exactly.
know?
I'm curious because I'm now just thinking about it because you mentioned that idea of like going on walks and the work happens in your like day-to-day interactions with like the mundane. And I'm curious if you
Mhm.
think have you found that like your move because your move is to a new like vibe like you said before
Yeah.
stream like you were in the city and now you're in the hills as you said. Like do you feel
Uh-huh.
like that is helping with the creative juices flowing for you?
Yeah, it's a weird one. I'm not around people all day anymore, like I was, but I hated the people I was around, and I did my best to ignore them. So, um, but I'm not in the city. It's not loud and noisy and chaotic, but I never really liked that anyway. Like I grew up in the country,
Mm,
and like where we've moved to feels a lot like where I grew up. It's much slower, like pace of life. But like the other day, I was trying to write something. I was working on dice souls, and I was really stuck. And I was like, "Fuck it, I'm going for a walk," because there's like four or five like named bits of woodland near the
Mm.
house that I haven't explored yet. So I was like, "Fuck it, I'm going for a walk." It had just snowed, and I went a walk through the woods in the snow, and I came back and I was like, "Here's 1,000 words of dice souls that I couldn't get out before." Like just flowed out of me. It's great. I don't leave the house much because I'm an indoor kid.
Hmm.
Um, but it's nice to have somewhere to go that isn't like a coffee shop. It's nice to just be able to go for a walk.
That's all I've ever done is the coffee shop. That has
Yeah,
always been my thing is like, well, I'm downtown, so where am I gonna go? I guess I'm gonna go to the coffee shop
yeah.
and sit
Like
there.
it's cool because we're not too far from the city. So a couple of times, like I've been like, I need a change of scenery. I need something a little bit more stimulating. So I'll hop on a bus and it's like 25 minutes into town,
Oh, nice.
back into Manchester, and then I go to like there's one of those like pay per minute cafes.
Oh yeah.
So like you go in and it's like 7p per minute and you help yourself to coffee and cake, and like I'll go and I'll sit in there for 2 hours and get some writing done and then come home. And like that suits me fine. I mean it's
Yeah.
early days, I might get bored, but I don't think I'll get bored. I really like it. It's really good. Um I'm immediately so much happier and so much more productive. So I hope that the money side of things works out so I can keep doing it.
I just know for me, like getting out of the house is when I get things done the most. I am an indoor person as well. So like for me, it's not like going and wandering the streets. That I don't think that's gonna do it for me. But it is in those, like honestly, the most productive I tend to be is every month our school, my department and the college that I'm a part of has college meetings. So all the faculty from the College of Education, Social Sciences get together. It's the most boring meeting in the world. We're just going over reports that everybody already submitted online. And Chris, the amount of writing and ideas that I get done on the page
Ah,
during that meeting, oh,
it is good to have something going on to physically ignore.
yeah, exactly. I
Yeah,
I know like this thing. I've already read these reports. I already know what's going on. So let me just write. And it looks
yeah,
like I'm like taking notes about the meeting too, because I'm like,
amazing. That's so good.
So that's
I
my strategy.
That's great. I've been doing a lot of thinking about like rituals and stuff.
I
Because
really
like,
want to talk about that. Go on.
cool, okay. Um, because like one thing I really struggled with when I was working, once because I think I worked in private healthcare, and
Mm,
so like through the first couple of lockdowns here, it was really quiet for me, so I managed to get a lot of work done, like creative work, and then it picked back up again, and I was just burnt out. I couldn't write at work anymore because I was
mm.
too tired, and I couldn't get into a routine at home. And I don't know about you, but I've always creatively really thrived on routine,
Yes, this is
and
why I'm
ritual.
so excited to talk about this.
Yeah. Um, so I've been doing this thing now. My routine, it's slowly shaping up, and it's not identical every day because sometimes, things just don't work out. But my routine is I get up in the morning, I go to the gym, I spend like an hour and a half, 2 hours in the gym because it's my hobby. It's my one hobby
Mm.
that I haven't monetized.
Yet.
And then yet, fitness influencer, here I come.
I mean, you just gotta gamify the gym, and then you've found the perfect Venn
Yeah.
diagram.
Um, and then I come home and I bought one of these little things, little timers. Um, and I stick it on 20 minutes, and I've been doing my writing warm-ups. They've been replaced this month with Reeve Dean stuff.
Mm.
But I write for 20 minutes just off a prompt. And then when that's done, I sit in front of a blank page for an hour and I don't force it. Or whatever, like I open Dice Souls and I sit
Mm.
in front of it for an hour. And if words happen, they happen because I'm very conscious of the idea that you can force creativity, you can force yourself to sit down and write, but if you constantly do that, that's how you burn out.
Right.
And sometimes the best writing happens when you're inspired. And there's this whole, you can't base a career on I'm just gonna write when I'm inspired. You have to sit down and force yourself to do the work. So I'm trying to combine the two things where I sit down, I force myself to write for 20 minutes to prove to myself that I can. Um, and then I just wait and see what happens. And some days I sit there for an hour going, this is shit. I'm not writing anything. I'm wasting an hour. And some days I write 8,000 words in that hour.
Wow.
And it's meant that like when I have to do freelance writing, I know that I can just turn it on and write if I have to.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have to wait and be like, oh, I can't think of something to write for this. I don't know what to do. I can just do it. It's like starting the ritual from a position of power by forcing myself to do it, and then just waiting and seeing what happens has been really good. And then the other thing is like ending the ritual. So like 5:30 every day, I turn my PC off, I leave my office, and I close the door, and I don't go back in
Oh,
until the next morning. I don't come in here if I'm not working. I only come in here on the weekend when like I'm talking to you or
I've
you
dragged you
know,
back into your office.
no, it's cool. Like this room does not get used unless I'm working.
That see,
Um,
that's awesome. We can't do that right now because our apartment is
mhm,
literally all like
yeah,
the dishwasher is right here, and the sink is right there, and then
that
the
was it in
couch.
my old place.
So
Like
there's no getting away from this PC. So like even if I'm on that couch right there trying to
you're
enjoy
next to
something
it.
else, I'm next to the PC going like I could go
Yeah,
over there and just like mess with
yeah,
Drifter's layout for a little bit. And there's
yeah.
literally no
And
way
like
for me to like truly just shut it away and be like it's gone. I don't have to see it
yeah,
or think about it.
and like I've got my Chromebook downstairs, and like some nights like I'll be like, actually got I want to do some creative work, and I'll get the Chromebook out
Mm,
and I'll do some writing for like half an hour or an hour, but it doesn't feel the same as like sitting in front of this PC and like I am in work mode. It feels like fun writing, not work writing.
right,
And I think that's gonna prove to be really important as well. Like being able to have it still be fun, even though it is my job, I think is
right.
gonna be really important. We'll see. It's early days.
I want to talk about your morning like your writing rituals because
Uh-huh.
oh we have a question from Spain coming in. So
Oh shit.
uh I'm gonna just ask you this question now before the chat
Yeah.
moves past it, and then we'll come back to this. How do you feel when a lot of games inspired by one of your games are born? Which of the games inspired by the Wretched is your favorite?
It feels awesome. Um, it doesn't feel real. Like
You had so
it's
many games in
bizarre.
the Wretched Jam, like
So
so
many.
many.
It's so bizarre. And like the Wretched was one of those games that like managed to pop up above like RPG Twitter and like get some
Hmm.
not mainstream notice, but like shut up and sit down credit
Right,
and stuff. So like it's sustained in a way that a lot of my stuff doesn't, and it's really weird. But it's I love like one of my big things is getting new people into the hobby and encouraging people and being like, actually, you know, anybody can write.
right.
And I love that Wretched and Alone has sort of has inspired people to write and given people tools to write games. I'm really proud of that, and I'm really grateful anytime people write a game with it because it's great. My favorite game that someone's made with Wretched and Alone is Before the Dawn by
Mm.
they go by VLX Cat now. Alex Catto um, is a folk horror game about a group of people who go too deep into the woods and unearth a horrible monster and try to do a ritual to stop the monster killing them, but you are the monster.
Yes.
It's so good. It it's it's like you can tell that Alex is a fiction writer as well because like
Mm.
the writing in it is really beautiful and really gripping and really fucking visceral and horrible. Um, yeah, play Before the Dawn. It's great.
I mean, I can attest to how impactful like the Wretched as a system, like Wretched Alone system was for exactly like you said, inspiring a lot of people that and you can do this. Like anyone could be a designer. You have it in you to make one of these things because like my first game was technically Score, which was something that I did on my
Mhm.
own, but then like from there I learned that there's this whole indie RPG scene, and that's when I started to go, "Oh, maybe I could do more with this." And truly like the Wretched was one of the first things I saw, and like the idea of the Wretched Jam, like so my game that I made was rigged, and that was one of the first games that I made like quote unquote on my own as just like oh, I'm gonna just try making a game, and it was like hugely impactful to me to have the Wretched out there and the jam going on. Like this is again one of the reasons I was so excited for you to be here is because you have been wildly impactful on my like trajectory of becoming what I am today. So
That's really nice to hear. That's awesome. You do have
you're
an Emmy now.
awesome. Well, no, I don't. I have
No?
many
Oh,
nominations.
many
I
nominations.
have
Do you know
four
what? I say this.
nominations.
I I say this anytime the Emmys come up, and I know it sounds like I'm always saying this because I have a nomination and didn't win one, but I think the real prize is in getting nominated because winning one is a popularity contest.
Right. There was no way I was gonna
Winning an Emmy is about how much
win.
you can mobilize Twitter to vote for you, right? I think getting nominated is the real win. So you've won 4 Emmys as far as I'm concerned. Congratulations.
Take that. Product of the year. That's right. Slayers is product of the
Yeah.
year.
Best rules. Best rules, I
Best rules,
remember.
best game, product of the year. In your face, Spencer Stark. This is the real top Spencer in the RPG scene.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Spencer Stark is a wonderful person, and Alice is
That's
Missing
just
is a
like a lovely
fantastic
man.
game. um, yeah, I mean, the Wretched obviously huge, hugely explosive in terms of like the jam was so many people. It was cool because I saw like a lot of people also making probably their first games with something like
Lots of
the
people
Wretched.
making their first games. Like, I don't know what happened to Boise, who you wrote
Yeah, I think
this
he
with.
he kind of just transitioned from what I saw to doing like more like war game like tabletop wargaming stuff and
Oh,
like
okay.
skirmish stuff. So like kind of again like adjacent to our like zone, but
Yeah,
not
yeah.
like over it anymore. But yeah, Adam
Cool.
was great to work with.
Yeah, I bet.
Um, but I want to go back to your morning rituals thing because I want to
Okay.
talk about your writing rituals because
Cool.
I am now on winter break. Our
Hmm.
semester is over, and I have uh, some time before I have to go back to school. And part of that I've been doing the last few days is I've just been doing morning streams, and they're just kind of like brainstorming streams. They aren't necessarily like I'm going to sit down and work on this specific thing, but just like I'm just gonna like kind of brainstorm thoughts about things. So like I talked
Yeah.
about modular games and season passes the other day, and I enjoyed that. And I've been thinking. The first day I was like, I'm not gonna do what Chris does, which is write something and produce something. And now, like 3 days in, I'm like, maybe I should do what Chris does and write something and produce something. So I want to talk to you because I know you're doing the advent calendar thing right now.
Yes.
But before, and I want to talk about that, but I'm all over the place. I want to go back in time to
Okay.
the pre-advent calendar when you were doing the cool like tables that you were making essentially.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can find like a link and throw it in chat for folks. But um, like where because you said you had like prompts. Like is this the thing
Hmm.
that you got like the prompts from the Google form? Is that what you're using for that?
Yeah.
Like
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
awesome.
Um, I I think I asked on Twitter and I got like X replies and I threw them into a sheet. And then I've got the form as well. So every couple of days I check the form and I take anything off it that isn't awful because some of them are really not good, but whatever. That's the nature of crowdsourcing ideas, right?
Right.
Um, and I drop them into the sheet and then I clear the response from the form. And so every day I roll. What's it up to now? Let me see how many entries I've got. So if I was going to do a warm up this morning, I would roll 1D 172. Quite
Wow.
a
So
lot
you
of
have
entries.
a lot of
I have a lot
fuel.
of material there, yeah. Because I mean, when I started doing it, I was like, I'm just going to come up with an idea for a random table or whatever every day. But then I found that I was spending more time trying to figure out what I wanted to write than actually writing, which defeats the purpose. And
Right.
so I crowdsourced the ideas. And that's fun as well because it's a cool little creative constraint of, writing something that I might necessarily not want to write or not have any ideas for immediately is
Right.
really cool. And I think is a good habit to be in as someone who's kind of doing freelance work as well. Because you're not always going to get gigs where you're writing something you want to write. It's just the nature of the beast.
A-
So
And you might find that you actually super enjoy writing about a thing that you didn't think you
yeah,
would enjoy writing about. You're like, oh, actually, I never thought about this thing, but wow, I actually had a lot of fun making a table of blank. Um,
exactly. Like there was one that was what happened to that coin. I think was one of the last ones that I did before I started doing Reeve Dean.
right.
Um, and I was like, oh, what, how many interesting things can you do with a coin? And it turned out to be really fun. Um, and when I was doing my degree, which is in creative writing, we did a poetry module, and I'm not a poet. Um, I enjoy writing poetry. I enjoy working with the form of poetry, but I'm not a poet. Um, but one of the things that we did, well, we got told, I can't remember now, but was like, right, when you've got a topic for a poem or a theme for a poem, and this is something I do when I'm writing lyrics for the band as well, is write down everything you can possibly think of about that theme
Mm,
and until you can't think of anything else, and then keep going. And that's where the poem happens. Once you've exhausted all the obvious stuff, that's
right.
where. And that's sort of what been doing with these tables as well. Like I'll spend 5 minutes just writing down all the obvious shit, and then I get to the fun stuff, and
That's
that's
super
what I throw
cool.
up on the blog. Like a lot of the tables that I end up throwing up on the blog, from the warm ups are like only 50% of what I actually wrote, but it's the good stuff.
Right. That's super cool that you go past the first thought and you don't want plan A or plan B. You want plan like L, you want plan
Yeah,
like
just get
N,
get in the weeds with it. Like
right. That's cool.
it's when you hit that moment where you sit there going, "Oh God, I can't think of anything else," and then you force yourself to not be done and to keep going,
Right.
and then suddenly you get like a second wind and it all starts flowing again. And you're like, "Oh shit, this is the interesting stuff."
Right.
But I mean,
I
sometimes you get a prompt and you're like, "I have something for this," and it just flows. But
right. There's a lot of psychology to what you're describing about this idea of
I
like
bet.
going past like what you're describing is this idea of like functional fixedness, which is this idea that you get stuck on like, oh, well, the purpose of this thing is this, and I can only think of it in terms of its purpose, and then understanding that like, no, a pen is more than just a pen. It has a whole bunch of other uses, and then there's lots of like tasks that we use to measure stuff like that. Um, so I want to administer one of these psychological tests to you one day, the alternative uses test. It's a very cool
Let's do it.
creativity test. Um, so I do want to talk about Reeve Dean, but there is
Yeah,
a question here that I think is interesting. So Big on Road asked, how much do you find art and layout a distraction from the mechanics and writing of a game itself?
not at all. Um, Basically, it's yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
The different skill sets. Reeve Dean's been interesting because I'm not doing any layout for it initially, but like it's a different it's a different discipline really. And so like when I'm doing layout work, I actually don't do that in my like 2 or 3 hours of
Mm,
forced creativity work a day. Um, I will do that later in the day when I've got my writing done. I don't have a project that's in layout at the minute, but I'm very conscious of the fact that like I work really well when I have some kind of structure. And so I'm
mm.
trying to structure my weeks to be like Wednesdays are what I've started calling bad brain days. Like I can't write on Wednesdays. It's just not working for me. I think because I don't go to the gym in the morning. And so they've
Uh,
become like do manual tasks, do fulfillment for the web store, um, maybe learn something new because I can do input but not output, um,
mm,
and do the functional bits of layout. where it's like setting font styles and setting margins
Mm,
and like setting the basic flow of a page, doing that stuff on a Wednesday because it's just kind of like it's like Lego bricks, isn't it? It's like building blocks. There's no like it's not doing the artwork and the creative like I wouldn't do Troll King or Morgboard style layout on a Wednesday because that's
right.
like creating an art piece for every page. But like laying out a very simple document is something that I could just kind of do without much. I don't know. I've lost the entire thread of what I'm saying.
I get you. I hear what you're saying. I've been teaching myself how to do layout little by little, just so that I can have the freedom or the ability to do layout for my projects on my own without
Mhm.
being entirely reliant on other people, so that I'm
Yeah.
not just exporting Google Docs, which is mostly what I was capable of doing before. Um,
I mean, it's a starting point, isn't
it
it?
is, yeah,
Like,
but it's
I was
been.
thinking the other day.
Oh yeah,
Sorry,
go
go
ahead.
on.
Oh, I was just been saying it's been a nice for me. Layout is my nightly ritual, so it's the point where
Oh,
I'm done. I don't think I can write anymore, or I don't think I have got the capacity to like come up with one more power for this faction, or come up with one more blank for this. But I can
mm,
move things around in Affinity, and that is a
yeah,
totally different like fuel source in my brain that I'm activating, and so that is just like, yeah,
absolutely.
I can move. I don't have to type any words. I've got the words. Now I'm just moving them around. And
Yeah.
that's just like I found that my layout stuff happens at night for me as my like
Hmm.
cool down like if you had asked Spencer 1 year ago if he would have done that, he would have been like, absolutely not. What the fuck are you talking about? Layout? That sounds like the
Yeah.
most stressful thing. But now it's my like, oh, I might just move things around for
Yeah.
30 minutes and we'll see how it
I do a
goes.
lot of layout when I'm playing games with people because
Oh,
like when I'm GMing a game, I'm like constantly engaged
right.
and I can't do anything but run the game. But when I'm a player, I'm quite a I tend to be quite a passive player.
Yeah.
Like I'm quite background. Um, and because of the ADHD, like I can't just sit and listen to someone talk without being engaged, without doing something else. And so I'll just open InDesign and
That's brilliant.
I'll just do layout while I play D&D or something.
I feel like I remember seeing Will Yobst say that they play the guitar while they're playing with
Yeah,
it. Like that's a brilliant like this makes so much sense, right? Like just like
yeah,
fiddle around with something, have fun while
yeah.
you're.
Like
I
when
think
I
that's a
was
great idea.
when I was like 16, 17, doing my A levels, I was doing for some reason I was doing computer science and they were teaching us to code in Delphi, which is like super old and super shit, and I don't remember any of it. But the only way I could focus on what I was doing was I took my double kick drum pedals into the
Mm,
computer lab at college, and I would sit and do rudiments with my feet while I typed. It
that's
used to
awesome.
drive people mad.
That's awesome. Ooh, we're giving BLG power by all this talk of ritual and concepts
Yeah,
around it.
BLG's here. Fuck
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, Okay, we have another couple of questions, and then we will talk about Reeve Dean, and then I want to
Yeah.
talk to you about season passes. I have so much I want to talk to you about. But we're back from a question from Spain. We're curious, wanting to discover more about the news that comes from, from Asia. So like Thousand Islands, the Magus, Catchstream, Arc. Have you seen any of the games there? So like, are the RPG scene and stuff like that? Any recommendations that you have or that we have from the RPG scene?
Yeah. Is Navathun's End out yet? I don't think it's out
I
yet.
don't think so. I don't think so.
That's I've read an early draft of Navathun's End by Pamu and Sin,
Hmm.
and it fucks. It's so good. It's so good. Like if you're into PBTA stuff, like it does shit with PBTA that like I haven't seen before.
Mm.
It's real good. I think that was that part of our shows?
Yes, actually, so
Yeah,
yeah, I do remember like last week getting a an email about the R Shores PDF. I think it might be out actually. And then
might
again,
it?
like I'm so
If
bad at
it's out,
engaging with
yeah,
PDFs, so like I know I
same.
have it somewhere, but I haven't actually until I can hold it in my hands. It doesn't
Yeah,
exist.
same. But fucking great. Jammy's game, Our Haunt, which I think
Yes.
Possum Creek just kickstarted.
Yes.
Um, I'm so out of the loop at the moment with what's funding and what's out and etc. But
We launched on the same day, Slayer's Almanac and Arhant. We
oh
were we
shit,
were launch
okay,
partners. Uh,
nice,
yeah, that one just came out. Yeah, that's a
yeah,
really good one as well. Or it's not
real
just came
good.
out, it just funded.
Yeah, that's been out before, and this is like a new edition. But that's real good as well. Like Jammy is like goals. Jammy's so good.
Gotta get them on the show.
Yeah, and Sam, one second.
Yeah, no problem.
Um, Bubblegum Sam,
Mm,
Sam Mui just released a Wretched and Alone game called Horse Girl.
yes. Oh my
Um,
God.
it, inspired by like Tusk and really fucked up body horror. Um, I I don't know if I would recommend it.
I would recommend looking at it just
I would.
so you could
Mm,
see the. You have to
I
see it. You
played
have
it.
to see. Did you?
I played it, and it is an experience. Let me tell you.
I can only
If you
imagine.
were not into extreme body horror and fucked up religious horror, maybe pass on it. But
Mm.
play anything that Sam's released. Like Wet Cigarette is one of the most impactful games I've ever played. Um, yeah, there's so much good shit coming out of
I didn't know that you had played
RPG.
Horse Girl. I I
Yeah.
I I have not played it. I have seen it. I've been looking at it. And I've been watching like people reacting to it, and it's one of the it's so polarizing the reactions to
Mm,
Horse Girl.
yeah.
Either you're like
Which I suspect is what Sam wanted.
yes,
I can't speak for them, obviously, but I suspect that Sam wanted a reaction out of that game, and boy, did she get it.
yeah.
Like, yeah.
Also, Will Yost is literally playing the guitar while watching us right now, so called it, nailed it.
Excellent.
So
That's like a star-studded audience for this show, isn't it?
I'm a little nervous. There's some cool folks in chat right now.
Yeah.
Um,
Chat is cooler than us. What's going
I
on?
know. Um, so Reevdeed, that's been your.
Yeah.
So I actually wanted to ask you about that in relationship to your morning ritual. So I mean,
Mhm.
I guess first of all, like for folks who don't know what it is, like maybe a little insight as to what it is. But are you writing these every day, or is this something that you had pre-written?
Little bit of both.
Gotcha.
The idea for Reeve Dean I had about 20 hours before I launched it.
Okay.
So yeah, on the because I was supposed to do a games advent calendar with Kat Evans and Law Gist and Jessica Markram. We were going to do an advent calendar, and then we were talking about it, and we were all like, "Oh fuck, it's the 30th of November, and we haven't written anything, and we haven't figured out how we're going to do it." So I was like, "Do any of you mind if I do my own advent calendar because I've just had an idea for
hmm
one?" And they were like, "No, go for it." And so I came up with a name for it. I came up with a brief pitch for myself. I made that GIF. I tweeted it with the word tomorrow, and then I went, "Oh fuck! Now I've got to do this."
What have I done?
So in the first, I wrote the first week's worth of entries that day,
Okay.
and then I've been writing a couple of entries a day ever since. And so I think I've got now up until the 20th of December written, and I'm just writing a little bit more every day.
So
So
this is like your new morning writing ritual as
yes,
opposed
this
to
has
the.
replaced my morning ritual. Yeah.
So
Um,
I mean, it's so cool. I mean, like truly the coolest concept in the world. So folks don't know, it's an advent calendar game where every day you're releasing a new just like an advent calendar, you're opening up the little box and seeing what prizes inside, and every day it's basically the file on itch gets updated with the next piece, essentially.
yes,
Uh,
correct.
and we're learning more and more and more about this place that you have created.
This fucked up little mountain parish. Yeah.
I mean, it's such a cool idea. I'm obsessed or love the idea of the drip feed of the here's a little more, here's a little more, here's a little more. And an advent calendar style release is like especially for like a setting supplement sort of thing. Like here's
Mm,
just like wanting to learn a little bit, and especially for a fucked up setting, where you're like, I don't want to show you how horrible and bizarre and strange this place is whole hog right out the gate. I want you to every day be on your toes to learn a little bit more about how strange this place is.
it's been really fun because it's like there's not a you'd think there'd be a lot of overlap between like fiction and especially adventure writing, but there's not a huge amount. And this has allowed me to tap into like serialized fiction,
Mm,
but in an adventure format.
yeah.
And so like, I feel I don't know how it's working. I don't know if it's having the effect because I'm not getting a lot of feedback from people about it, which is fine. Um, but it's the aim is to like give you enough information every day to like drip feed the horror to you while
Hmm.
still having it be like I'm hoping that by this point if you wanted to start running a game of D&D or whatever set in Reeve Dean that you would have enough to do it at this point
Mm.
without knowing exactly what's going on. Um, Possibly I've not given enough because I've not done all the hex fills yet. But yeah, I'm trying to release it in a sequence that like keeps you hooked and keeps you wanting to know more.
Well, yeah, I mean like the next level for me in my head is like advent calendar game that gets released that is like a tiny piece of the game that you play it every day. Like it then
Yeah,
becomes a play ritual for the morning of like, okay, I'm opening up December 12th's box, so to
you
speak.
could do that with a journaling game, couldn't you? You could just
Right.
have a different prompt every day. Like, in fact, Gion Shim basically does this with I can't remember what the term she uses for them
Yeah.
is.
I wish I always forget it because there is a
Yeah, but
specific term.
those games, you get like Wait for Me came in your inbox every single day was
Right.
super cool. And that's definitely been an influence format wise on this.
Mm,
I'm just looking at how like I watched Midnight Mass like 3 days before I started writing Reeve Dean. So like that episodic TV structure is like in my head as well while I'm writing it.
right. Oh, there's Dice Ghost mentions an interesting thing here. It'd be cool if you played it out like this, if each day was also a new day in the game itself.
That would be cool.
Which reminds so like Witchburner, right?
Oh, that's good.
So like that is based off of a kind of a pretty set schedule of time of like events that happen one day after you've begun 2 days, 3 days, and so like transforming. Yeah, I know my copy's somewhere over there. I
It's,
wish I
it's
could
on
go
there
grab it.
somewhere, yeah.
Um, but like transforming something like Witchburner into this
Mm,
advent calendar sort of thing would be very interesting, very
very
cool.
cool.
I like
My
that.
this spoilers for Witchburner here, but my favorite thing about Witchburner is that like there's nothing happening in it.
Hmm.
Like it's all the horror comes from the shit the players do.
Right.
I love that. That's not the case. Spoilers for Reeve Dean, that's not the case with Reeve Dean. But God, can you imagine how pissed people would be if I released it one day at a time for 24 days and then was like, there's nothing happening here.
And that's it.
The end.
You're the monster, not
Merry
me.
Christmas.
Yeah, that's very cool. I love that idea. Kat has mentioned in chat, does anybody else have this creeping, oh, I need to start a new project right now feeling listening to this chat? I'm glad we could be that inspiration.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Um, oh, there's a question about the pricing structure. So I thought the pricing
Uh-huh.
structure for the advent calendar was really clever. How's that been working so far? I'm actually curious about that too, because it's
Yeah,
related to sort of how I think about pricing things like season passes. So like, how's that process been for you? Like, do
really
people
good,
make, does it make
actually.
sense to people?
Yeah, I think
Okay,
so. I
good.
haven't had anybody kick off about it, and that's usually a good sign. Because I remember tweeting quite flippantly, as I do often, maybe a
You?
year ago.
No.
Me flippant on Twitter? Never. Um, I remember tweeting something about like a game that's released one page at a time over
Mm,
a month with the price increasing every day.
yeah.
And a lot of people on Twitter being like, why would I? What? Well, I'm not going to pay for that because I don't know if it's going to be any good. And me being like, it's $1 on day one. Like, fucking put your hand in your pocket if you're interested, and if you're not, shut up.
Right.
Um, and so I was worried that I would get some of that, and I haven't. And my theory going into it was that I would sell a few copies on day one because people were a bit like, what is this? This is a
Mm,
weird pitch. And then on day 5 or 6, when it was up to like £2.50, £3, people would look at the content that was coming out, think, oh, actually, this is turning into something. I'll buy it now. And I thought I would get a spike on like day 5 or 6 of
mm.
sales. What actually happened was I got a fucking flood of people grabbing it on day one.
Oh.
Like it did amazingly well day one, and that sort of tapered off very slowly.
Mm,
Um, but tapered off very quickly even, but it hasn't stopped. So I still sell like 3 or 4 copies a day
yeah.
now, even though the price keeps increasing, and so
That's
I'm
awesome.
happy with that because like I think 12.50 when it's all done will be an entirely fair price for it.
Right.
Um, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna spend the time between Christmas and New Year like compiling it together into one document, putting it into layout, and then I'm gonna do a print version of it.
Oh, sick.
And like
Yes.
everyone who bought it is gonna get a discount code for the print version.
Right.
I don't know how much, like I might just say, here's 12.50 off the print version. Everyone can have the print version for a fiver or something,
Right.
just to be because I don't want people to be like, it's far too complicated to try and issue discount codes for how much people paid for it, and B, then I
Oh
think
my
people who
God,
got in
that'd
on,
be a
yeah,
nightmare.
and like people who got in on it early would then suddenly feel like there wasn't a benefit to them getting in on it early, which is totally valid. And so I'm just going to be like, whatever, it's £15. Here's £10 off it for everyone who bought it
Right.
when it was just in PDF or something. I've not figured that out yet, but I want to do a print version of it because I think it's cool. I think it's a cool little project.
Well, then I will be buying said print version of it whenever that exists. Can't,
Yeah, that'll
cannot wait.
be early in the new year. The other thing I've been doing, so like obviously we're all talking about Kickstarter and alternatives to crowdfunding at the minute and like
Great
sustainability.
transition to what I wanted to talk about next.
Yeah. One of the big things I'm thinking about is like how to develop multiple revenue streams.
hmm
And one thing I want to launch in probably January is like alongside my Patreon, like a second thing that's like behind the music.
Oh, cool.
So like you pay $2 a month or whatever, and it's just a monetized private blog basically that is like not focused on a final product that comes out every month, but more on like how the sausage gets made,
Mm,
like design thoughts, blogs, like essays, whatever. And something I've been doing throughout Reeve Dean is keeping a journal. Not
right,
every day, but like just of shit that comes to me of like the process of doing Reeve Dean and putting it together and like my expectations and XYZ. And so I'm probably gonna just like throw that up on a new Patreon at some point, along with a couple of other things, and be like, here's another way you can support me if you want. Um, so
would
yeah, if you're interested in Reeve Dean, I've been writing essays about it.
well, I'm just so curious about the way you think about and design games anyway. Like when you did a dragon game and then you had the annotated version of it, like that's very cool stuff to me. That's awesome.
I'm glad.
Like
I
I
thought it
mean,
was such a spite project.
well, yeah, as our best work tends to be our spite
It
projects.
does.
But yeah, I mean that's why I like to do design commentary streams and stuff like that. It's just like
Mhm.
I just want people to know why I did what I did. And like that's why Lumen is written the way that it is. It's not written like a technical document because that I know I would not be able to engage with that. I want you to understand what I think of. And so to have like a way to like just be like, "Oh, I can pay you a little money to get access to your designer brain? Give it to me."
Yeah, like I find that stuff like there's a part of me that's like, why would anybody want to pay for this? And then there's another part of me that's like, I would pay for this.
Right.
So like, well, I mean, it's one of those things where like the absolute worst thing that happens is I say, here's a way, here are some things I've written about my process. You can pay for them if you want to, and nobody pays for it. Like,
Hmm.
okay, cool, failed experiment, that's fine. Like,
But I still find like, but at the end of the day, you'll still have gained from having written them because I know that I find
yes,
I benefit from myself just like even if nobody's on stream while I'm talking myself through like something a project that I'm working on, like nobody's in chat or anything, and I'm talking to myself, I have benefited from that. It's like it
yeah.
helps me
Like
tremendously.
when I was doing my degree and when I was doing my master's, with every creative assignment we submitted, they would always make us submit like a creative statement as well about our process and our thoughts and X, Y, Z. And at the time, like when I first started doing them, I was like, I just write shit. Like I don't know what my process is. I don't
Right.
know this. And so the first few that I wrote were like complete bullshit, just making shit up. But the process of doing it made me much more mindful of my own creative process
Mm.
to the point where suddenly I was paying attention to what I was doing and why I was doing it and why what decisions I was making while I was working and why. And I started to really enjoy they call them creative responses. I started to really enjoy writing the creative response, and I would often like write the creative response as I was working on the project. And I think it made me a better writer.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I've been doing not consistently, but trying to get back in the habit of doing with my games work as well is like talking to myself about why I'm doing what I'm doing,
That's
even if
awesome.
no one ever sees it.
It's such a helpful exercise. I
Mm,
think that's an awesome idea. And hey, yeah, if ultimately a few folks do find it useful and grab onto it, then all the better for it too.
yeah, exactly.
You did mention, and this is the one other thing I had written down that I wanted to talk to you about was this because you posted on Twitter. Was it
Mm.
yesterday? I don't know. Time doesn't make sense. Also, your yesterday might not be my yesterday. Again, time doesn't make sense. But you made a post asking people, and it was a genuine question that I thought was really interesting, which was, um, what would you do if you like had a crowdsourcing that failed or something like that? Like,
Yeah,
what's your plan or something like that? And I think that was really interesting because there's been a lot of conversations with the Kickstarter announcement that happened a few days ago about Kickstarter as a platform, crowdfunding as a platform, like how it affects people at different scales, and it's been a complex conversation for sure.
very. Yeah.
But I am curious about your thoughts about like because and I'm curious what your thoughts are for you because
Uh-huh.
you are going full time. You are trying to go the route of like I'm doing this on my own. And so in my mind I'm like
Yeah.
how does Chris deal with this? Because they are like I would imagine Kickstarter is a big deal for
Yeah.
somebody who goes
Like
so like
I sorry, go on.
no, I was wrapping it. I was just like so what is like what is your
Yeah.
answer to your question?
So it's an interest. It's weird that this has happened this week because like I've been talking to this about this to people this week, and like the day before the Kickstarter announcement, I was talking to someone, and I don't know if I can say who it is, but someone is
Mm,
writing an article about Kickstarter, and it wasn't specifically about the announcement because the announcement hadn't happened yet, but it was
right.
about like the inside baseball, like the effect that Kickstarter has on you as a creator, because we don't often get to hear about that, which I thought was a super interesting topic for an article. And I was like, hell yeah, I'll talk to you about that because I have capital T thoughts about that.
Yeah.
But we were talking about how to divest from Kickstarter because, like, it's a fact that I would not have been able to go full time without the boost from Kickstarter. Like, Treasures of the Troll King made £25,000, The Wretched made 15 grand. D36 made about that, although much, much, much less profit for me than the Wretched or Troll King. So like I have taken a lot of money out of Kickstarter over the past 18 months. Like I
Right.
bought my house with Kickstarter money. But and so it's easy for people to point to me saying, get off Kickstarter and say you're a hypocrite, and that's fine.
Hmm.
But I don't think that playing Kickstarter roulette once or twice a year is a sustainable business model for anyone.
Mm,
It's certainly not sustainable for me because if I was solely reliant on Kickstarter money, then, you know, there's the question like, what happens if that Kickstarter fails?
right.
I saw someone saying, I cannot remember who this was, and I cannot remember the exact circumstances of what they were saying because I don't know them. So if I've misrepresented this, I'm sorry. But I saw someone say something like, I need $30,000 to stay in the country.
Mm,
Kickstarter is my only option of getting that. And I was like, that's terrifying.
right.
That's absolutely terrifying because what if that project doesn't fund? And that was what prompted me to be like, what is your contingency plan? Because you have to have a contingency plan, surely.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to me as someone who wants to build a sustainable business to gamble the future of my business on whether or not a Kickstarter funds.
And like not
It's,
only like funds, but like goes gangbusters too. Like
yeah.
that's totally like Troll King exploded, which was awesome. Like huge
Okay, exploded.
congrats.
Yeah.
But I have to imagine that the popularity of it was maybe was surprising, like the way that it exploded for
Very.
you, right?
Yeah.
So like,
And like I set that budget with profit built into it.
right.
Like if I had only just funded, I would have paid myself 10 cents a word for
Hmm.
writing Treasures of the Troll King. And I would have been happy with that.
Right.
But a lot of people are not setting profit into their goals. They're setting the goals at a level that just covers the physical cost of production. So it pays their artist, it pays their
Exactly.
editor, it pays for printing, and there's no profit in it for them. And I've done that. I made no profit from D36.
Hmm.
I actually lowered my stretch goals in order to be able to hit the future issues that haven't come out yet. Because, you know, people haven't been able to write because the world is on fire.
Hmm.
But I made no profit from D36. That was a mistake. And I only have myself to blame for that. But there
Hmm.
is this culture of setting a not even an artificially low goal, but setting a I want to call it a subsistence goal where they just earn enough to produce the thing and don't actually pay themselves.
Right.
And I think that's dangerous because it doesn't make for a sustainable industry.
I definitely was one of those people in my first few projects where I was like, okay, well, how much does it cost to pay my artist, pay my layout person, and print it?
Yeah,
And that's my budget, plus
yeah.
10% or
Um,
whatever for the fees and all that stuff. And
yeah.
then,
Under the floorboards was just the cost of printing, and I collected shipping through Kickstarter. I
yeah,
took a bath on shipping
ne
with Under the
oh my
Floorboards.
God, I fucked
Never
myself on
again.
Slayers with that.
Yeah. Because I funded Under the Floorboards and then the pandemic happened. And by the
Mm,
time I fulfilled it, shipping costs had doubled and I'd already collected. And I went straight back into my overdraft. I lost all the money I made on Under the Floorboards.
yeah,
Luckily, the Wretched did gangbusters. But again, Wretched goal just pay for printing.
right.
That was all the Wretched goal pay for. You know, I was lucky that it took off the way it did. And it was literally only Troll King. Troll King was the first Kickstarter where I set a goal that actually included paying myself properly.
Right. Yeah, I have only recently like learned that I should do that and started to adopt that into my stuff.
Yeah.
Like I uh barely had any written anything in Nova to pay myself. Like the budget for Nova was to pay Eddie and Jam
Mhm.
and Will and buy all those fucking books.
Yeah.
And then anything
Like
on top of that was what I was gonna make.
even the budget for Down in Yongady, like, didn't pay me well.
Mhm.
Like, because I knew it was going to be well, it wasn't going to be the first project since going full time, because my original plan was to go full time in January.
Mm,
So Yongady was going to be the project that carried me into full time. But
gotcha.
even then, I was stupid and didn't set a proper goal that would have paid me well.
Right.
Like the initial goal was £6,000, I think, and it took raising 15 to pay me 10 pence a word, which is like 13 cents a word.
Mm,
Like, I don't know. I think Kickstarter's dangerous, and
yeah.
I want to get away from it. I'm doing Zine Quest with Alicia, and my original plan was okay, I'll do a Kickstarter a year and hope that it makes like 10 grand.
Right.
But the more I think about that, it's not a sustainable business model because it's not, it's gambling. It's gambling in your future.
Yeah. I've only again recently like come to grips with and like accepted the fact that I should budget in paying myself for Kickstarters. And part of that comes from the wider conversation. Part of it comes from like one-on-one conversations with people like Tracy Barnett. They like their business model, which is based off of like the pay what you can Patreon
Mhm.
thing, which I've adopted, is also like Kickstarters are run for profit. Kickstarters are there.
Yeah.
That is how I make my money because if I'm gonna be full time, I have to like my budget is I need X number of dollars from this Kickstarter. And
Yeah.
listening to Tracy talk about that, I was like, oh, that makes sense. That makes a
Yeah.
lot more
Yeah.
sense than
I
me.
like, excuse me, like, you know, if someone's, if there's someone this week is like, well, actually, Kickstarter is a big part of my business model, and I'm too far in to change that at this point, then yeah, totally.
Right,
Like, you're gonna have to keep going with it. Like, I don't think anyone's gonna judge you for saying, actually, yeah, my business does rely on this, and I need to run the Kickstarter.
right,
Like, if anyone is judging people for that, then they can get fucked. But for me personally, like, it's not a stress that I'm willing to put myself under regularly.
right.
Like, I want to know that. So when I went full time, I saved up a year's worth of income
Hmm.
so that I can, expenditure even, so that I can definitely, definitely do this for a year. And my goal for the next year
Right,
is to get to December 2022 with enough money to do it for another year.
right,
And so I don't want that to be a question mark hanging on a Kickstarter that I
right.
run in June. I want to know. And so, like, that's why I'm doing things like Reeve Dean. That's why I'm concentrating on retail sales. Like, I just did a big sale to Exalted Funeral that's
Mm,
gone a long way towards making sure my 2023 can happen.
right.
I think it's,
Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go
Oh, I
ahead.
was just saying, like for me, it's that is what it is becoming as well. Is thinking about it of like when you said that for me, and with the Kickstarter announcement, I've been recalibrating in my mind of like, okay, so what is my future of like producing things and releasing things and like trying to create something that might be ultimately sustainable. And I think for me, it is a step backwards and not like
Mhm.
backwards, but like a scaling down of sorts and
Yeah.
like wanting to build up enough of a following and enough of a consistency in things that I can build and build and build and just kind of have I know what I can count on. Like having that thing
Mhm.
that I can
Yeah.
count on is the important thing. So like Patreon's a big part of that and itch sales, but itch sales are not something you can count on. So that's
Mhm.
not as but like you talk about like the importance of a mailing list. That's also super important. Start building your mailing list right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Like,
interesting
immediately.
yeah, I know. There's a lot of interesting things that folks are saying in chat here about like it's a lot of people under budget themselves for Kickstarters just to like you get that.
Very easily done.
It's
Yeah.
super easy and it's super appealing to do. It feels like that's the
Hmm.
thing to do so that you can say
Especially
we
when
funded
you
in 3
see,
hours.
yeah, especially when you see like your free leagues and like
Yeah,
whoever else coming onto Kickstarter with a massive, expensive licensed IP with a shitload of art, like a big name writing team, they're gonna print 100,000 units of it,
right.
and they've got a goal of like $10,000. Like, they aren't using Kickstarter for the same means that we are, and there's no
Right.
value judgment in that. Like, I don't give a shit how corporations are behaving. The thing is that, like, people will inevitably compare themselves to those campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, Free League don't need Kickstarter money to print the One Ring
No.
at all. That game happens whether it funds on Kickstarter or not, but that's not the case for Lumen.
Right.
And so people need, I think the really important thing is that people, whether they do it intentionally or not, we cannot behave in the way that corporations do because it's not sustainable for us.
Right.
We need to create our own models and our own infrastructure. And if Kickstarter is a part of that for you personally, then that's totally valid. Um, the thought of relying on a platform that I don't control terrifies me.
Yeah, which is why
It's
I
the same thing as when like Patreon changed their fee
yes,
structures a couple of years ago, and everyone was suddenly like, "Oh fuck, all our backers are leaving because they don't like what Patreon has done to the fee structure.
right.
What are we gonna do?" And like a guy called Whipstash, who built my website for me,
Mm,
very, very generously offered at that point to help people get set up with WooCommerce websites that had have memberships on them
mm,
so that they could do the same thing as Patreon without being beholden to Patreon.
right.
And I think we're seeing in part that same thing happen now with the conversation around Kickstarter, where people are like, oh, actually, yeah, it's really bad to have all our eggs in one basket that we
Mm.
don't control. We should build some infrastructure.
Yeah, that's why I'm moving towards smaller scale things, moving towards my like season pass stuff of like a drip feed model that's like fits my ability to like write things when I can enthusiastically write them. I'm not putting everything into this like big book that has to succeed in certain
Uh,
ways. There's two interesting questions in chat that I want to ask.
oh, I am deliberately not looking at chat because I
Oh,
know people get upset about this topic.
well, and thankfully nobody it's there's no I'm not seeing any fire in here, which is
Good, good,
good.
good. Because everyone in chat's cool.
Yeah. So like there's definitely like Raul is here talking about how like obviously Kickstarter sucks in general for like he's in Brazil. So
But
just
anyone who's not in the
can't access it.
metropoles, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Can't access it and always has to match up with people in like the US or whatever to
yes,
that alone sucks shit.
yeah.
Um but
Like
there's
the
a
fact that Jammy had to partner up
with
with
Possum
Possum
Creek.
Creek, the fact that Latam Breakout, all
Right.
that gang have had to partner up with Soul Muppet. Like Soul Muppet guys are really good friends of mine. I'm really glad they've done that. That team shouldn't have had to rely
Right.
on white British people in order to get funding.
Right. There's a question here about going back to Kickstarter budgets,
Uh,
which is, do you budget in work done prior to your Kickstarter into your budget with setting
yes
your
and
goal?
no. Yeah, so I always used to, and I did. This was what got me in trouble for D36 because I budgeted in like everything that I'd spent. And then I read a blog post by I think it was Michael Prescott saying
Yes.
like, yeah, saying like actually all those costs that you spent before the Kickstarter are sunk costs. Like if you don't fund, you're not getting them back.
Right.
So don't include them in your goal. And I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Right.
The problem where I ran into trouble was that then off the back of that, I lowered my stretch goals
Mm,
and just made a very foolish decision that wasn't Michael's fault. That was my fault.
right.
But yeah, so with Down in Yongady, like I paid Rowan for the cover art and three pieces of internal art before the campaign, and I paid Jared to edit the intro section before the campaign, and they were not included in my goal because the goal was going to be the highest goal I'd ever set anyway.
Mm,
I was worried about it funding anyway, and I thought either I set the goal at I think it was either 4 or 6. The fact that I can't remember what my Kickstarter goal was and it only ended a week ago is
yeah.
ridiculous. But yeah, let's say for the sake of argument the goal is 4 grand, and because obviously every time you increase your goal, you increase it more than the amount you spent because you've got to increase it an additional 10% for fees and for
Mm,
tax. So sticking an extra £1,000 on your goal is actually sticking like an extra £1,400 on your goal.
mm,
And so when I'm sitting there thinking, I'm worried that this might not fund, I'm looking at a goal of £6,000 and a goal of £7,500. I'm
mm,
like, it makes sense to set the goal at 6 because that way I cover my future costs. And if we overfund, I get paid back.
right.
Whereas if I set the higher goal and we don't fund, then I'm
You
left with
get nothing.
nothing.
Right.
Nothing. Um, but that was setting, so but I set that goal with okay, I'm not covering my costs, but there is a rate of pay for me in here. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just a break even.
Yeah. There.
So yes and no, I think is the answer to that question.
Yeah. There's a question here, and I think it's a we've talked about it a little bit, but uh, so Real Meat Castle, great name.
That is a good name.
Someone who's just getting into this, right? And their
Ooh,
goal for this is to launch with a quick turnaround. So they're basically just trying to put together a goal that covers print and ship, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, without necessarily
Okay.
paying themselves. Does that, but they're asking is that short-sighted of me? Should I set a goal that pays me for my time spent already? I think it's an interesting consideration, but also considering what we just talked about with the sunk cost thing, right? Like
Yeah. So
that's
my question, I think, in response to that would be, if you're just raising money to pay for print, why do you need Kickstarter?
mm,
Why not just do pre-orders?
I think
Because
it's the marketing.
printing, it is
That
the
would be my
marketing.
that would I
Yeah.
can't speak for Real
Like,
Meat Castle, but
no,
like
like I know logically like that is going to be the answer because you can't argue with Kickstarter's mailing list and
right,
like, 85% of your backers are going to be people that aren't your audience.
right.
They're not people you already have access to. But I think it's important to know what your audience is because Kickstarter gives
Mm,
you an inflated sense of what your audience is, right?
yes, that's an
Like
extremely good point.
like when I did Under the Floorboards, that went amazingly well. But none of those people were my audience.
Right.
And so like the next thing I released, I was like, oh shit, Under the Floorboards has made, I don't know, £1,000 or £2,000 or something. This is really cool. Maybe I've got a career here. And then I released the next thing, not on Kickstarter, and it flopped. And I was like, oh fuck, where have my audience gone?
Yeah,
And it's because
where are all those floorboards people?
where are all those Floorboards people? And it's because they weren't my audience.
hmm
They were Kickstarter's audience.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons that I've done Reeve Dean this month is to be like, cool, what does my audience actually look like
Yeah.
now? And it's been really beneficial for me to know that and to be like, cool, this is how many people will give me money for a game. This is how many people will trust me with a game that's not complete, and this is how much money they'll give me, and it's really valuable for me to know that.
Right. That's what I have found like my Patreon to be, which is like
Yeah,
these are people who will just like they want to support me. They don't even necessarily know what they're gonna get
yeah,
every month, but they believe in me as a designer, and I know I can count on that.
yes.
Um,
Like, I would rather have 10 people who will give me a fiver a month every month without question than 1,000 people who will give me a fiver once,
right.
you
Exactly.
know?
Yes.
But to answer the actual question, no, I don't think that's short-sighted.
Yeah.
Like, if all you need is the money to print and ship, then just ask for that. In an ideal world, yeah, ask to get paid as well. But like, you know what's best for you.
Yeah. I and again, like if your goal is just to get like this quick turnaround, especially if you're just getting into it and you just want like a quick, clean, like I just need money to print this thing and get it to you,
Mhm.
I think that totally makes sense. But
One of the most valuable things I ever did was so I did Under the Floorboards. It wasn't ready to go yet. I was approaching the time where I was like, shit, I'm about to order 500 books and post them out. I've never fulfilled print before.
hmm
I'm going to write a game quickly that I can do a very small print run of
Yeah.
and just learn the process of printing and shipping. That game turned out to be The Wretched,
Real
but
quick.
real quick, just bang that out. The Wretched got written in like a day and a half. But the point is that the original print run of The Wretched was 25 copies.
Yeah, I
And
remember that.
the yeah, you have one of them,
I
right?
do have one of
Yeah.
them.
Um, the purpose of that was purely for me to learn how to print a book because I hadn't done it in 15 years. Learn how to fulfill physicals and not have to learn that while fulfilling a Kickstarter because
Yeah.
when you've never done it before, like suddenly having 1,000 books turn up at your door
Mhm.
and have to put them in envelopes and figure out how to get them in people's hands is terrifying.
Mhm.
And this is another reason why I'm like, start small.
Yeah.
Please be good to yourself and start small.
I was lucky that my first game score, I don't think I only shipped out like 80 to 100 copies on the first run, which was a lot for somebody for
Yeah,
still for like a first run, but was like, I can do this. It's like one or two boxes that showed up in my house. I'm just packing a few envelopes and I'm getting out the door. And then like Slayers was my next one, and then it was like 1,000 books in my house, and I was like, ah, fuck,
yeah.
this is different.
But like I did We did the Wretched, did 25 copies. I did the Kickstarter, which had, I think, 1,000 backers or something,
Mhm.
which was a lot of books. And I was like, shit, this is a lot of books for me to fulfill. And then Shut Up and Sit Down coverage happened.
Oh
And
my
honestly,
God.
that was like fulfilling a Kickstarter again. Like that
Yeah.
was mad. And then Troll King happened, and I sold 1,200 copies of Troll King. And I was like, do you know what? That's about my limit for fulfillment.
Hmm.
And my plan anyway, so I want to do a book for Cyborg next year.
Mm.
I'm hoping that Johan will be down to do some art for it again. Um, and I was gonna do it on Kickstarter, and I probably won't do it on Kickstarter now. But I was gonna cap it at 1,500 copies anyway,
Mm.
because I don't want to fulfill more copies than that.
Yeah.
I don't have the resources to do it. I'm too ADHD, like must do everything myself to hand it off to a fulfillment company.
Yeah, I can't do that.
Yeah. And so I was gonna cap it at 1,500 copies anyway. And so like if I'm gonna artificially limit the number of copies that I fulfill, then why am I using Kickstarter anyway? Because the point of Kickstarter is like you're gambling on you want to be Wonder Home, right?
Yeah.
You want your six-figure Kickstarter. But if I'm gonna say actually I'm gonna make sure that that cannot physically happen, then why don't I just do pre-orders?
Right. Yeah, I hear you. And I know like Bats is doing pre-orders for Wizards of the
That's just
Waste.
doing pre-orders from Wizards
Just
on the Way, so I'm
just announced
super
that like
excited for it.
yesterday or this morning or something,
Yeah,
and I'm super into that idea.
yeah.
I will be
I mean,
screaming from every place I can.
big
Yeah,
Bats fan.
exactly. I don't know
I've
why I
even got,
pointed.
I've even got songbirds right here.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah,
So
big
yeah,
Bats fan.
Kickstarter's a whole thing. I thought your post was really interesting. I thought it made me certainly think a lot, and I'm
Mm.
continuing to think about it. So I just appreciate your insights into all of this. It's been really
Yeah, I
helpful
mean,
for
like,
me.
someone might be sitting there listening to me being like, "You were talking out of your ass," and that is fine. Like, I'm not an expert, and
Right.
I'm not trying to set myself up as being an expert. I have big capital T thoughts, and I talk about them with an air of authority because that's how I was raised.
Because that's
But,
you.
like, I don't actually know anything.
But you speak with the confidence of somebody who does.
And that's why I get in trouble.
Exactly. What is the phrase that you use? You are like aggressively online or something like that.
Yeah.
You have a very good phrase for like how you're online.
I've been taking a step back from being quite so aggressively online. Um, it wasn't intentional. It was I am buying a house and I don't have time to
Yeah.
be aggressively online. But you know what? I'm so much happier.
Yeah. That's probably a
I
good idea.
barely look at Twitter anymore, and it's the best.
That sounds so nice. That sounds like a
Yeah,
good idea. I should probably do
it's
that.
been good. I have it blocked on my PC between the hours of 9 and
Brilliant.
5:30 every day.
Brilliant.
And part of the reason is because I know it's an ADHD attention grab, and it's much easier for me to spot myself slacking off
Yeah.
and being on Twitter if I've got my phone in my hand than
Yeah.
if I'm just on the browser.
That's a really good idea. Good good tip. Good tip. I should probably do that. Um,
We'll see how long that lasts.
yeah, exactly. It's all early on.
Yeah, I'll be bypassing my own block. I'll be installing TweetDeck.
Uh-huh. Um, so I mean, I'm wrapping down myself personally. How about you? You got any other like hot thoughts or things that you wanted to talk about?
Probably, but God knows. God knows.
I feel like this has been an awesome chat. I feel like this is
I've enjoyed this. Yeah.
only part one of our coffee break. I feel like I'm gonna have to have you back soon to keep going about this. Because, Chris, like I said earlier, that you have been hugely inspirational to me as a designer. So I just want to say thank you to that. I know a lot of
Oh,
folks in chat or in the world have been inspired because of things like the Wretched. So keep up the awesome work. You're
thank you.
crushing it. And everybody should go support Chris in any way, shape, or form that you can. Speaking of, how can people do that, Chris?
That was a hell of a segue.
I'm getting
Uh,
really good at this.
yeah, I bet. Do you know what? You're gonna figure out how to end the podcast next, and then you're gonna be unstoppable.
Oh, if
Nobody knows
only I
how to
could
end
gain that power.
it. How can people come and follow me on Twitter at Pangalactic, like the drink in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Um, where I'm there sometimes.
Sometimes,
I'm
but
no
not
longer
between nine
sometimes.
and
No,
five.
yeah.
Don't even think
And
about it.
yeah, don't even think about it. Lootstheroom.io is my card that has my lists to links to the website, the itch, etc. All the things, the various and multifaceted things that I do.
Throwing all these
Um,
things in chat for folks, so
oh, thank you.
excellent.
Yeah. Right now on twitter.com, I really want to hear from you about your favorite D&D adventures. So go and find
Oh
that post
yeah,
and throw some adventure titles at me because that's a fun project I'm working on.
I have none. I've never played a pre-written adventure,
It's fine.
but I know I enjoy like looking at the ones that people have been recommending. So
Yeah,
uh
this is like entirely a personal project.
yeah,
Like, um, if I started talking about it, we'd be here for another hour. So let's not.
that's part two.
Yeah.
Whenever it's done or coming out, that's when you'll come back and we'll talk.
Yeah.
Um,
When I have something to show for this
hell yeah.
madness that I've embarked upon.
Well, Chris, this has been fantastic, super fun for me. I'm so glad that we got to like catch up like this. I really
Yeah, this was real fun.
appreciate that. Appreciate everybody in chat for being here. You all were wonderful. Um, especially when we got into spicy Kickstarter stuff. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for not setting me on fire for my opinions. I appreciate
Yeah. Speaking of Kickstarter, stuff like
that.
that. Next Sunday, I've got Kat coming in. And she is going to be talking about Blazing Him, and the Kat's right here in chat. So we're going to talk about her awesome Lumen AP podcast that she's crowdfunding right now, which I am so excited. Like the concept of Lumen as an actual play, I might be biased, but I think it's a really great idea. So we will be back next Sunday, same time for coffee break. So for now, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, and evening, everybody, and we will talk to you later. Bye.